suspected the creature's health should just be high enough to finish the job. In mere seconds, a thunderous boom echoed across the arena, the shockwave so powerful it sent Su Sheng, who was nearby, tumbling through the air. Dazed, Su Sheng could only wonder in disbelief. What on earth was that? The crowd rose to their feet, the shockwave obscuring their view of what had just happened. Some even shielded their faces, unable to bear the sight of the explosion. Smoke billowed, and debris floated in the air. As the smoke slowly cleared, the female knight seemed like the only person still standing on the stage, panting heavily. She had no idea what had happened. Her armor was battered, her shield cracked, and her face bruised. All she remembered was seeing her protective barrier only lasted a single second in the explosion. When she came to her senses, her teammates were no longer on the stage. Everyone was teleported out, with a few even unconscious. Now, with the Guardian and hundreds of skeletons eyeing her menacingly, she didn't know how to react. One of her eyes seemed injured, but she didn't seem bothered. After a few more seconds, she gave a wry smile and shook her head as she admitted their defeat. She didn't care about her injuries and held no grudge against Lin. Instead, she gave Lin a thumbs up and shouted that with young prodigies like him, their empire's future was secure. With those words, she leaped from the stage. The referee, momentarily stunned by the unexpected outcome, took a few seconds to collect himself. He regained his composure, grabbed the microphone, and loudly announced that Lin had won the 5th round of the challenge, followed by a deafening applause from the audience. Going up against a group of powerful level 50 professionals and winning almost felt like a fairy tale. The entire arena erupted into cheers as everyone stood up. Yi Yi wrapped her arms around Tao Tao, jumping excitedly. Cheers filled the arena. It was a breathtaking battle, destined to be recorded in history. The powerful mage, floating in the air, looked at Lin with increasing admiration. Beside him floated the reward for the 5th round. He gave a kind smile and praised Lin, then handed over his reward. Knowing that the mage must also be a top-tier professional, Lin respectfully bowed. But internally, Lin was contemplating whether to continue the challenge. Perhaps there was a 6th round. Just as he hesitated to say it out loud, his communicator buzzed. It was a message from White Divine, advising him not to get ahead of himself. It seemed White Divine understood exactly what was in his student's head. After seeing the message, perhaps it was time to call it a day. Lin returned to his team, greeted by congratulations from everyone. Amidst the celebrations, a familiar voice called out to him. They turned to see it was the mage from earlier. Lin bowed again and asked if the mage needed him. The mage introduced himself as Kim, one of the 12 Empire's senators. Lin still remembers the other senator from yesterday, though not at White Divine's level. Nevertheless, these senators were among the top-tier level 80 professionals. Lin knew that someone of Kim's stature wouldn't approach just to introduce himself, and he was absolutely right. Kim mentioned that Lin was a student at Xiajing Academy and the National Scholar this year. Looks like Kim knew quite a bit about him, perhaps having done some research on him before calling him over. Kim went on to reveal his role as a guest professor at Xiajing Academy, and also being a mage himself. He expressed his desire to mentor Lin. Tao Tao, standing nearby, was surprised to see someone as powerful as Kim wanted Lin as his student. Lin, however, was composed as ever, perhaps expecting something like this. He respectfully declined, informing Kim that he already had a teacher. When asked who it was, just then, Lin's communicator rang. With a knowing smile, Lin excused himself, saying it was his teacher calling him. Kim, eager to know who Lin's teacher was, urged him to answer. The communicator connected, and it was White Divine on the line. White Divine began speaking to Kim as if he were a junior, half teasing, half seriously asking if he was trying to steal his student. Kim was shocked, so much so that the art style even changed, his expression turning from surprise to a helpless smile. He never expected Lin's teacher to be White Divine. White Divine, voice still stern, tells him that forget about stealing his student, and instructs him to keep Lin's information confidential. Kim quickly nodded. The conversation took a more serious turn, as White Divine instructed him to wrap up what he was doing, and bring everyone to meet him in Manhwa. He implied that Kim should already know the reason. Kim exhaled deeply, and agreed without hesitation. White Divine then reminded Lin to pay him a visit, as it was time to return, as he had a new task for him. After bidding farewell to the senator, Lin and his team headed back to Xiajing Academy. Once back at the academy, Lin took some time to recover his stamina and spirit. It was impossible not to be drained after a series of intense battles. After restoring his energy, he took out a basic magical potion, and drank it. He immediately felt a warm current flowing through his body, boosting all his attributes by 200. Even for him, this was a significant enhancement. Instead of using a skill scroll, Lin chose to head directly to White Divine's small courtyard. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Lin respectfully brewed tea for White Divine and Meng Anwen. White Divine seemed to enjoy this very much, as he kept showering Lin with praises. Meng Anwen, sipping his tea, began to undermine his old friend's boasts, meanwhile telling Lin that he did very well, and he had outdone his own teacher. Turned out that White Divine only managed to finish the 3rd round when he was Lin's age, also telling Lin that he had made history. This comment wiped the smile off White Divine's face as he shot a glare at his old pal. White Divine steered away and changed the subject. He instructed Lin to reach level 30 in the next few days, suggesting he avoid the Yuan battlefield and instead head to the academy's dungeon hall, and afterward, they will be heading somewhere. Lin was initially puzzled, considering the Yuan battlefield would allow him to level faster and also gain military merits. However, White Divine was primarily concerned for Lin's safety. Since he had attracted too much attention, going out would make him a target. Reflecting on the fate of other young prodigies who had been assassinated in recent years, he didn't want it to happen to Lin. White Divine warned him to be cautious as he believed that the only safe place right now was in the academy. After Lin departed, Meng Anwen, setting down his teacup, expressed his surprise at White Divine's decision to take Lin to that very place. White Divine seemed confident, stating that visiting that place was essential for becoming a qualified professional, and the sooner Lin went, the better. Although Meng Anwen agreed with White Divine, he was worried about the potential dangers Lin might face. White Divine, however, appeared unconcerned, having great faith in Lin. He believed that Lin had hidden strengths that even they might not fully understand. Moreover, with the mark of the heroic hall, Lin could be revived if anything went wrong. Leaving White Divine's small courtyard, Lin returned to the dungeon hall. As he looked at the building and the bustling students coming and going, he kinda misses the place. Upon entering, Lin was quickly recognized by many. The results of the professional contest spread like wildfire, especially since Lin had beaten all 5 rounds in the challenge matches, making him an idol to many of the students. The ones who had previously been carried by Lin already believed that Lin would become a divine-level professional in the future, and even considered telling their grandkids about the time they were able to team up with Lin. However, he didn't get ahead of himself, recalling his teacher's advice, and realized that he was indeed becoming the center of attention. Whether this is good or bad, only time will tell. It wasn't long until Lin spotted Harmony, who greeted him with a warm smile. They quickly began chatting. Harmony seemed to become a bit more outgoing, but her attitude toward Lin hadn't changed. Seems like Harmony's information broker business was thriving, happy to support an old friend's business, and transferred 100 points to her for a dungeon recommendation. With a grin and a thumbs up, Harmony guided him to a dungeon which she thinks is perfect for him. The two walked to the entrance of a dungeon, the Fire God's Palace, a level 32 dungeon accessible to professionals between levels 27 to 37. However, there were only normal and nightmare difficulties, with information on entry costs and cooldown times also provided. However, what surprised Lin was the record time for clearing this seemingly ordinary dungeon was 8 hours and 32 minutes. What made it more odd was that it hadn't been broken for many years. He wondered why this dungeon, with a maximum difficulty of nightmare, took so long to complete. Harmony chuckled and clapped Lin on the shoulders, began explaining. Turned out that this dungeon was one of the 5 elements series. Other than the 4 common elements such as wind, water, fire, and thunder, there was also a lesser-known element, light. Each element corresponded to a specific dungeon where, with some luck, one could obtain elemental shards. Legend had it that collecting shards from all 5 elements would yield extraordinary rewards. However, what exactly these benefits were remained a mystery, as no one had yet managed to collect them all. Intrigued, Lin scanned the hall for dungeons associated with the other elements. Currently, only 3 elemental dungeons were present. Fire, which allows professionals to enter at level 27, and water and wind, which required a higher level to access. The remaining 2 elements were up to Lin to discover on his own. Harmony, who was fully aware of Lin's ability, believed this dungeon wouldn't pose much of a challenge to him, which was why she recommended it. With a grateful nod to Harmony, who also waved at him and wished him good luck. Then, choosing the nightmare difficulty, Lin stepped into the dungeon. Immediately, he felt the intense heat filling the space, with flames scorching everything in sight. A short bridge stretched across to the other side, under which flowed molten lava. Simply standing there, Lin began to sustain continuous elemental damage. His skeletal armor flickered continuously as he crossed the bridge and continued deeper into the dungeon. The reason for the long completion time became apparent. A typical team would need constant healing to advance even a few steps, not to mention the downtime required for a healer to regenerate mana. As Lin navigated through the dungeon, he quickly realized that a single healer wouldn't suffice in such an environment. Likely needed 2 healers, so they could take turns healing. Soon enough, Lin encountered his first monsters, 2 level 32 flame sprites. Their gaze met, and almost immediately, the flame sprites began channeling a spell. Despite their relatively lower stats, they were equipped with special traits like immunity to fire elemental damage and only take 50% of any physical damage. The 2 flame sprites each hurled a fireball at Lin. Instead of dodging, he wanted to test out the damage with his skeletal armor. Although slightly frustrated that he couldn't use his corpse explosion on these elemental creatures, he was quickly reassured that these mobs were no match for him as fireballs harmlessly bounced off his armor. He then summoned several skeleton warriors in response. Although flames quickly appeared on the skeletons, causing continuous damage, it wasn't enough to halt their steps. With great swords drawn, the skeleton warriors charged and swung at the flame sprites. Soon, 2 system notifications popped up. Defeated level 32 flame sprite. Experience gained 640,000. Obtained flame core. As expected, upon their death, the flame sprites dissipated into the environment, leaving no corpses behind. After dispatching the flame sprites, Lin summoned additional skeleton warriors and sent them in various directions to scout and engage any monsters they encountered. As the skeleton warriors explored the map, Lin realized that the dungeon also contained other types of monsters, and there was a fair bit of them. Thinking quickly, Lin decided to use a more efficient strategy. He summoned more skeleton warriors, planning to have the skeletal warrior lure them out and gather all the monsters in one place. Not long after, the monsters in the dungeon began chasing the skeletons like a tidal wave. The skeletons sprinted through the lava caves, drawing out one creature after another, effectively gathering them near the entrance. Standing at a high spot, Lin watched as monsters entered his attack range. He started with a slow curse to reduce their speed, and then the skeleton warriors turned and delivered a rampage strike on one of them. As soon as they killed the first monster, Lin raised his hand and unleashed a corpse explosion. The powerful blast enveloped all the monsters, swiftly annihilating them. The impact was so intense that the entire dungeon began to tremble, causing the flames on the ground to blaze even more fiercely. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon hall, people were just doing their own thing until sparks began to fly from the entrance of the Fire God's Palace. Heads turned just in time to see flames roaring out of the dungeon entrance. Almost in mere seconds, the entire entrance was engulfed in flames, causing the nearby professionals to take several steps back. Confused and shocked, the dungeon information had been updated, slowly appearing as it turned out. The hell level difficulty was now available. The news caused a sensation throughout the dungeon hall. The dungeon had existed for so long with only normal and nightmare difficulties. What is going on?